to go. Crumple it up, put it right back in here.
It's just random.
I'm late for an exercise class this morning. I was supposed to go to one of the spin classes, and you need to use weights, and I was bending over to pick up some 3-pound weights, and my back went tick,
Oh,
and I had to leave.
I did it once moving in the last block, which was a box of towels. And that's what
A box of what?
towels.
Towels.
Yeah.
And it went
I
clink.
just picked it up and all the stress.
And when you do it when you're moving, everybody looks like you, like, are you just kind of playing possum here?
You say some 4-letter words, and
Yeah.
all around them to get it done.
You can tell if it's muscle, if it's fat, and if it's
All right. So this is a really fun thing, and a lot of people have taken this on. Like, Jason, making masks for Jason is a big part of his artistic practice these days. So any one of the things that I show you, I have another student, I'll show you her work at some point. Her name is Monique Rutherford, and she now runs a children's play education organization that teaches clay to Benicia, Vallejo, Vacaville. But she started by making, doing that technique of cutting into a slab and then stretching it out and stretching out these little designs. And she got really, really good at it. That was kind of exclusively what she did for a while. Okay, so now I'm going to fold this up. And I'm thinking about the shape, but I want it to be somewhat elongated. And if you look at it and say, well, that's not good enough, that's the wrong shape, you can add more, you can take some away. Here, I've got to put it, point it towards them. Yeah, perfect. That's not good. So then you just use the tape, and in part you're containing everything, but the other thing you're doing is you're shaping. I'm going, okay, this is how I want the. If I want it to be a little narrower here, I just tighten it up. So it's all about getting the shape that I'm interested in. And that's pretty good. You can see how elongated that is. That's a big old head. Now I'm going to use 25 pounds if my back will allow me. But you can do half that. You don't need to start out doing something so large. It's kind of a little easier to see when I work that large. We're gonna start by shaping this. Since I'm going to make an elongated shape, I want to start by shaping this round. I don't want to use a rectangle. I want to kind of round out the clay. So you'll see how I do that. You can see that Jason's got kind of a big kind of, it looks like I don't know, maybe a casserole or something there. Big pile of clay. Kind of patty.
I make little masks too.
What's that?
I make little ones.
All right, there's some smaller masks that they can make. And this is really a great way to be quickly expressive and explore things. If you're interested in the human figure, it's a great way to learn about the face. So now, why don't we move this out of the way? And I'm going to just kind of round the corners off of this a little bit. By the way, we're working really hard on trying to get some clay in the bookstore again. Hopefully by next week we will have clay back in the bookstore. If you are having a shortage of clay, let me know. So I'm just going to kind of flatten this out a little bit to start with. And just roll it around a little bit to get that. I'm kind of matching where I'm headed with the actual shape of the mask. And then just kind of flatten it out. And I'm going to do some things to add to this. I don't have my sharp stick. Okay, I'm going to go get that. Hang on a second. Right back.
I've got all kinds of little texture things. This is my favorite piece of stuff. I use this to texture all kinds of stuff. Rubber bricks. Great. And these little bisque clay balls that have all kinds of weird texture on them. You get all kinds of little colors. So I make lots of like ogres and demons, kind of stuff. So I like them to look kind of lots of texture.
All right. So with the same idea, I'm going to put in a bunch of texture here. If I end up deciding I don't like it much, that's okay. I can wipe it out. I can ignore it. But I can start with it. It's just like a free chance to get some things in there. A lot of times with a mask, you'll be working on it, and something will happen when you stretch it out, and that thing that happens will give you a suggestion of something. I think up there, the big elongated one on the right, that, on the left, the elongated one on the left, that the left eye was completely accidental. It was a tear in the clay. And I said, oh, that's the eye. And I just left it be. So you can do that. That idea of being able to see something unexpected that occurs and accept it before you wipe it out because it wasn't what you were planning, that's a real acquired ability. There's a great quote from Rodin, not that this is anywhere near what Rodin was doing at the time, but there's a great quote where he says, in one moment I can wipe out 6 months of careful observation. So that's a kind of suggestion that maybe something happens that you want to keep. So what I'm doing now is I'm just putting in a little spiral here. And maybe I'll get a little bit more of the stick. So you can all see what it looks like. Then I'm going to do something a little strange. I haven't used dry clay with you guys yet, have I? I'll show you how that works. So again, when you're doing this stick thing, remember to hit the same place over and over and over again. And you'll see why right now. So now I'm going to lift this up and just kind of round it out again one more time. And this is what I have. This is what I've done so far. And now, this is powdered porcelain. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this and I'm going to just rub it on the surface of the clay.
What's that you're rubbing on it?
Powdered porcelain clay, kaolin. And so it's clay, but it hasn't been, the clay that you use out of the bag has powdered clay like this. It has a little bit of flux called feldspar in it. It has a lot of different things in it, but primarily it's this kind of clay. And you can see what's happening. See how it's gotten kind of a yellow here? It's gotten a little bit of a kind of a beige yellow color. That's because the moisture that's in the clay has been soaking into the powdered clay, and it's basically turned it into a dry slip. It's gone from powdered clay into a sort of dried slip. And I think, as long as I'm at it, I'll do something like this too. Now, the only disadvantage to working like this is that you don't want to breathe clay. So when I start throwing this slab out, I'm going to hold my breath. And I recommend you do the same. So first I'm going to pick up as much of that clay as I can. Get it off the... Yeah, garlic clay. If you want to do this, if you want to try this technique, we can get you some clay. And the other thing you can do is you can wear a mask, which is very effective at kind of keeping you from... It's on the, so I've kind of rubbed it on the backside, and I don't really need it on the backside because it's going to be underneath. You're never going to see that, but it helps get the extra powder up. And I can also reduce the powder by getting a damp sponge. So Jason, tell me what you're up to there.
I textured the clay, and I'm using my propane torch to dry out the surface so that when I stretch it, you know, I'll keep most of that texture, but I'll also create more texture because the clay on the surface will crack as the clay underneath stretches. And the dry stuff won't stretch. And the plastic, wet clay below will stretch.
And if you're really nice, we'll get you another tank. He's almost out of gas there. So now I'm going to start stretching.
I just have it down low.
So you remember the rule for stretching, which is that we're going to hit the middle of the slab. We're aiming for the middle so it stretches the clay. And you can already see what's happening. The spiral is starting to stretch out, and the area where I cut is showing up dramatically different color, as well as the stick hits, because when I hit the stick many times, I hit that stick lots of times in the same place, so it folded over and protected some of the clay from the white powder. Flip it around here and try some on this side. So I want enough to wrap around. When I make my mask, I like to have enough to wrap underneath the slab. And now, I'm going to just use a kind of sideways technique to stretch it out. And we're getting quite large there. That's looking pretty good, isn't it?
Yeah.
We're almost there. I think I want a little bit wider. So, that's about all I can get out of there, I think, with this size. But as you see, take a look now, you can see both the texture and the use of the kaolin has really created a dramatic surface. And the spiral is really kind of intriguing. I love that kind of the pyramid or triangle here. I love the movement of these lines coming together. So there's a lot to work with, and I'll see what emerges. So now I need to shape this into a three-dimensional form, and I do it by laying it over here. We were talking about why newspaper, and we came up with some good things. One was that newspaper won't stick. That was a very good idea. And almost. I'm going to lift this up again. Could you slide the newspaper to about here? Just about down to this area here. No, not that. I need this ball of newspaper moved. Here, maybe I can do it. There we go. That's what I want. Yeah. So now I'm going to shape the piece. I'm just going to wrap, create a chin here. Here's the chin. And I'll just fold the clay under. I can smooth it out a little bit later and push it together. I can do that. And often something like this will happen. You see the top there? It's made a really interesting shape. Does it look familiar? It's just like that one up there. So, and as I work with this, I see that I've kind of run out of clay on this side. Well, that's okay. I can deal with that. But I want to see, what can I make with this? I could cut this off and just round this into a shape, or I can form this into something on top here. I think I'm going to I'm not going to do the big prong. I could do some kind of sculptural shape up there. I'm going to get rid of that and just wrap it around. A couple of reasons. I'm going to need some clay for other parts of this. So here's some clay. So now I'm just going to wrap this around. And there is the start. Put that in there. Here's the start of my mask. And at this stage, I like to find a board to put it on that's slightly larger than the piece. Because if you sculpt and you don't sculpt it on a board, what happens is that maybe you start working on an ear or some part of the forehead, and it gets off the board and drops down a little bit, which is fine until it dries. And then when it dries and you go to set it on the shelf, it sits down on that ear and snaps off that side of the piece. So you want to keep it all on the same level. You need a bigger one if you get what you find there. So let me look over here. Okay, so now I can actually lift this up and show it to you. That's what it looks like now. And there's a couple of things we're going to work on. So one thing I want to do is address this area here. I want some more clay under here. So what I'm going to do is just score and slip and add some clay that I can wrap around. So that's just to kind of finish forming the... And things are going to start to happen rather quickly now. I'm going to show you how to make a mouth, an eye, a nose, and some ears. And so you get a sense of how I do that. And the thing about it is there's already an eye there. Can you see that? That spiral has made quite a nice eye. And it's also suggested something. See that triangle? That's really suggesting, well, what if we put the nose over here and maybe an eye over here so I can do the mouth? So all of that texture has given me a really strong kind of direction that I can just respond to. And that's part of, I think, what masks can teach you is this spontaneity. I think one of the greatest living sculptors these days is a guy named Robert Brady. I find inspiration in his work all the time. And one of the things that he used to do, and I don't know if he still does it, he still makes masks. But for some time, many, many years ago, when he was working in his studio, he would just start out the morning with a mask. He'd just get a slab of clay, and he actually, I'm a little bit embarrassed for bothered by this, but he would throw it over a Tupperware dish, just a kind of dome dish, and he'd just throw that over there. And that's what he would start with. And I don't know if you remember that I showed you a funky mask, a little funky mask with spots on it. And guys, that was a Robert Brady mask of that kind. And when I first started teaching here, I told my students they couldn't use Tupperware or Corningware to push clay in to make a form. And then we went to Robert Brady's retrospective at the Crocker Art Museum, and there was a wall almost that big, just covered with masks. And the docent turned to us and said, "Now he started by throwing this slab over a piece of Tupperware." And every one of my students turned and looked at me. Yeah, if you ever want to, you can see there's a couple of Bob's pieces in the Crocker Art Museum, but you can also see his work at the Trax Gallery on 4th Street in Berkeley. And the Trax Gallery on the 4th Street in Berkeley is really an amazing place for pottery. It's one of the best functional pottery galleries in the nation. And then what you can find is that Bob Brady's studio is in the back, because he co-owner with his wife Sandy Simon, he is co-owner of the gallery, has a studio in the back. So always, if you can ask, can I go see what Bob's working on in the back? He is going to have, I think in March, is it March? No, I think it's later. He's going to have a show in Sacramento that I'll go to. He's a great artist. So I've now been able to put a slab on there, and I put a lot of slip, a lot of scoring, and I'm really pounding it in there because I don't want to trap any air. If I trap air, this is going to just blow off. So I don't want to trap air. So now I've covered that and wrapped that around, so I feel that this form has a little bit more integrity for me. I won't worry about the backside until Monday. When I come in on Monday, I'll flip it over and finish anything that needs to be finished back there. And I'll put 2 holes in the back where I can put wire to hang it up later. So now, as I'm looking at this, there's going to be some kind of eye, maybe up here. I think I'm going to put an eye here. I'm just going to put a slash in there now. Now I'm committed. There's going to be an eye here, right there. It's crazy. Don't know what I'm doing. That's the beauty of, I've learned over the years that the best work I make is when I don't know what I'm doing. So it's really quite something that if you sit and you plan and you make exactly what you're planning in advance, you're not you don't have as much, you're not bringing as much to the table as you do when you just kind of respond and you don't know what's going on, when you're out of the loop, so to speak. What ends up happening is the work you create is more alive, because if I don't know what's going on, I have to pay attention, I have to use all of my abilities right in the moment. What am I going to do here? How does this work? So now you can see I've cut an opening for an eye. I'm assuming this is an eye, and I've got a mouth. But I'm going to show you how I make lips, because lips can be... So in doing this, I'm going to talk to you about human figurative sculpture a little bit, about the human form. And one of the rules about the human form is there is no such thing as a straight line. There's no straight lines in the human form. And the other thing that's happening is that when you're making a mouth, you really want to emphasize, it's an opportunity to really demonstrate something is quite human and quite full. And so, for instance, we're going to use Hilani here as our model. And if you look at Hilani's mouth, you'll see, when you look straight on, you see a number of things. One is you see the dark line where the 2 lips meet. And from that dark line, the lip comes out. And then what happens is that lip look at what happens right at the edge of the lip as it's heading towards the chin. Can you see? It's not applied on. It's part of the same skin, flesh, that is the lip and the chin are the same thing. It's not like, because the difference is when people make human faces and masks, sometimes they apply the lips like Gumby, like little pieces of spaghetti, but you can see it's the same form. Now, would you look over to the back window there? Can you see that when I'm looking at her mouth, I can see the front of her mouth and the very side of her mouth, because the mouth is curved around. It's curved around. The lips are curving in. Everything's moving in a curve, right? Does that make sense? You all see that? So that's what we want to keep emphasizing. Thank you. If you want to get into art modeling, you can get a lot, it pays a lot of money. But perhaps not.
No.
So, I had an art model once when I was teaching human figure, and she, for years and years and years, modeled for all these art classes, and then she decided she wanted to be an artist. So she just got off the model stand and started making art, and she was fantastic. She had so much learning from sitting and listening to all these art classes over the years, standing mostly and listening. Okay, so, beautiful, beautiful art. Amazing, really thoughtful stuff. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a coil, but it's going to be thick in the middle and thin on the sides. Kind of almost looks like a piece of pastry. And then I'm going to score it. Now, because the mouth is completely round going in, when I put this here, I'm not going to touch this part anymore. We'll leave that. Touch a little. I'm not gonna push on that because that's already perfectly what it should be. And then this, I'm gonna make work right into the chin clay, so that it. It starts to follow those rules that we've learned, that the mouth is just part of the rest of the face. It's not sticking on top. So I'm working this right into what is the chin. I will lose some of the texture that I worked very hard to create, but you can't, you kind of, it's all trade-offs. Grab. What's going on over there, Jason?
Doing my eyes.
You're working on eyes?
Yeah.
You're doing them from the back or no, from the front?
So I kind of just set up the bones of the brow and the cheek. I open up the clay just with my hands and kind of squish it. And this one on the left eye, I'm gonna leave just the hole. And the right eye is a little bit more realistic, but still not very. But there is at least an eyeball in there.
Okay, so that's what Jason's got going on. I'm gonna finish the upper lip here. What Jason's talking about, we're gonna start working on with this eye, which is this idea, if you feel your brow, how hard it is, and your cheekbone, and then the ridge of your nose, that ridge there, it's no coincidence that those are so hard, right? In our genetic development, they foresaw tennis balls. So all of that, if a tennis ball hits you in the face right there, it's going to get blocked by the brow, by the cheekbone, all of that is to protect your most delicate sense. We have, as a sense, we have our sight is one of our most relied upon senses. And so, that's why you start an eye by thinking about the brow. Again, I am not going to touch this part anymore. And I'm going to push this in. This guy is turning out to look rather happy. I don't know how I feel about that. But when you see these two coils lay together and you see it worked right into the form of the face, right part of it, it starts to look really alive. The one thing I have to be careful about here, kind of too far away, we have to keep the roundness going. So I want to keep it looking round. So, now it's interesting because I have the mouth over here, and usually the nose kind of comes right to the center of the mouth, but this one is not going to work that way if the nose is over here. I'm going to get a little bit more red clay. I'm going to go see what I can find. And so to prepare for the eyes, I'm going to work the brow here. I'm going to come in here and see if I can build out the cheekbone a little bit. And I can also think about the nose brow ridge coming up here.
Zygomatic arch.
Which one is the zygomatic arch?
Cheek.
The cheek.
It's part of the maxilla.
He's Jason's background in anthropology. And the word I always forget, what's the name for the little furrow under above your lip? This part? Philtrum, that's right.
I've got the mouth here, and I just play. Sometimes I will have lips that aren't talking about, but most of the time I make the mouth really big. I cut it with this, and then I use like this little.
So, you know, there's so many different topics that can come up when you're making a mask. Clearly, we're talking about human figure, but when you're talking about human figure, you're also talking about kind of a narrative, you're talking about a story, you're talking about expression, emotion. All of that can happen.
I'm adding some gum, like some clay inside, add my gums, and I'm gonna put some teeth.
Jason's going to have he's going to make some dentistry there.
Yeah. I made these teeth yesterday, so they're hard.
Right. Made the teeth yesterday. So the teeth are made out of
Same clay.
porcelain.
Porcelain. Yeah.
So if I were to use porcelain teeth on here, they'd come out really, really white. It'd be really dramatic difference. Color. So I'm going to put a nose there somehow. So. So we have here 25 pounds of clay, and I'm adding, right? So we're going to be somewhere in the 30 to 35 pound range by the time I'm done. And we'll see how my back is going to be by the time I'm done. So, any questions or comments so far?
The mask kind of reminds me of the Enchanted Tiki Room.
The Enchanted Tiki Room of Disneyland.
Yep.
Mhm.
With the expressions and how it's made with the textures. When you're waiting to get the Dole Whip, and then you're sitting there listening to the stories of like the guy frogs that go around, and then once you go in, you see all the faces that start singing.
Right. I remember as a child the enchanted tiki room. I wonder. No, I like it over here. One of the things that happens is I've lost that lovely triangle that inspired the whole thing. This angle here is gone in the process. Well, that happens. So I'm just shaping this. I threw in some texture with cutting it with a spring just to see what it would look like. And again, I can wipe that out at any time. And I probably will. I'm going to bring it in. I think I'm going to bring it in there like that. That's where it's going. It's all very spontaneous. If there's a right answer, let me know. I don't know it. So now we're scoring again. Lots of scoring and slipping. Very important. You put on a piece this big, and you don't have enough scoring and slipping, and a little bit of air, just a little bit of air gets in there, it will blow up. It will come right off. Blow your nose. Yes, I did say that, didn't I? So you can see how freeing this can be and how fun. Try as you do this. You know, you might say, well, I don't really know how to do a human head or a human face, and you know, I don't know, you know, I just, so that's fine. And then you can say, but clearly, I know what an eye is, I know what a nose is, I can just go step by step and see what happens. So it's a really good way to give yourself permission to explore and play. We never finished why newspaper. Still haven't finished that idea. So we thought we did, right? Because we got it doesn't stick, right? We got that part. And then, what was the other one that we got? Oh, we're shaping, it allows us to shape what we're looking for in the face, right? That's good. Here's the one I wanted to come up with. That when you have newspaper, you know, what happens when the clay dries? What happens? What's that?
Clay dry.
When the clay dries, what happens?
It takes the paper from stays the shape.
It stays the shape, but how does the clay change as it dries? It shrinks. It starts to, and because the newspaper, even though it's kind of stiff enough to hold the shape, as it gets the pressure of the clay drying, it will compress. The newspaper will compress. And that means that it'll shrink rather than crack. If I put this over a piece of plaster this shape, it would crack. So I'm not going to ask you if you've ever done this before, because it just doesn't seem like an appropriate question to ask. But if you ever have picked your nose, making the nostril is pretty easy. I'm not saying I've done it, but to get a nostril, I just stick my finger in there and kind of reach around, and you get a nostril. And a nostril tends to be, you know, it actually is above where the bulb of the nose is here. Add a little clay to that.
Does getting Legos out of children's nose count?
That is such a really good training for your sculptural future. You sound like someone with experience.
Yep, I do.
So I've kind of knocked the mouth around a little too much. If I can't get it back into the shape I like, then I just cut it off and do it again. It's easy, easy. Any questions coming up as I'm working here?
Are you able to put like a ring around the nose? Like an earring around the nose?
You could. What you have to do is you have to put a hole in the nose where you want that to be. And then you fire it when it's finished, then you put a ring in. And you can either actually buy a jewelry ring, which would have to be quite large on something this scale. Because this is about 2.5 times human scale, right? You know, a human head is about this big. So you could do that, or you can make one. Just make it out of brass or make it out of steel. You can make it out of Legos. That's the fun part. I mean, I've made earrings out of fishing lures. I've made earrings out of car parts, gears. It's really fun. My wife is a jeweler, and I had a show where I was going to show 30 of these masks. And I make the hole, but I never make the earring. And it just they sit around. And then I had the show coming up, and I realized, oh my God, I need 30 earrings. So I just gathered up all this strange looking stuff. And I sat around for a couple of days, and I just made earrings. And it just had to look really interesting hanging down. So I used all kinds of material for that. So and I will work on finishing this shape and getting the texture I'm after, or the lack of texture in this case, more kind of a smooth form. All of that's to come. But I've got a general idea. And then we'll see about pushing this in. This is some kind of decision that when I do this, I don't get to take it back. Once I push this in, it doesn't come back out again. What's that? Poor guy? Yeah. Well, that's true. But I'm doing it anyway. And it's okay. I like it. Some things I like about it. One of the things I don't like about it is in doing that, the ridges of the spiral have been pushed right in parallel with everything else, so it's not as dramatic as it was. But I do like this concavity that I'm trying to create here. So you can see where we're at now. We've got a mouth, we've got a nose, and we can start on eyes in just a moment. I'm going to talk about eyes a little bit. This one, again, so if you look at the art of Henry Moore is a fabulous sculptor who in the 40s and 50s was pretty controversial. People thought he was a little bit horrid because he was such an abstract sculptor. But by the time the 60s and 70s hit around, he was about the most popular sculptor on the planet. And when he does an abstraction of a human face, one of the things he does is he'll make something, he'll make something that looks very much like a head, and then he'll just put a dot for an eye. And everybody sees it as an eye. It takes nothing. And I'll show you how that works right now. If I take this piece right here, we'll tip it up so you can see. This is where we're at now. And I'm just going to come in here and just put a hole and lift up a little bit. It looks like an eye. And there's a couple things working there. One is that, you see the nose, you see this. Everything's saying, oh, there should be another eye here. You see it here when I do that. But the other thing that's happening is that when you put a hole in a sculpture, when you dig in deep like that, the light doesn't go down there as far, so it gets dark. So, and that's one thing about eyes is no matter what color your eyes are, mine are kind of a hazel. I see a lot of brown eyes. What color are your eyes?
And
Blue? So you got, but if you look, let's take a look at at Maddie's blue eyes, and what you'll see is, get the bangs out of the way, what you see is that when you look at her eyes, it doesn't matter really that they're blue because you see the whites of her eyes, and by contrast, it's a dark circle. All of our eyes are basically dark circles surrounded by white. So the pupil and the iris come out dark. So when you put a dark, when you just put a little dark impression there, that's enough to read eye. And we'll use that same ideology right here. So the next thing we need to know about eyes is I'll score and slip this here. You know, we call this part of the eye the eyeball, right? Because it's kind of ball-shaped. If we were going to be more accurate, we'd probably call it the eye grape, because it's more of an oval than it is a ball. So, but again, what we were talking about earlier, the fact that it's kind of a gelatinous ball is pretty significant, because if it gets hit by anything, it's going to be bad news. So that's why the brow is hard, the ridge is hard, and the cheekbone is very hard. So now, you take this kind of grape-looking oval shape. If anything happens to it, it's not good for it, right? So that's why you have this ridge, and you have this and this, and that's something we keep in mind when we're making the eyes. So I'm just going to score this and slip it. I'm just going to push this in. And that ball shape is really important for us, because we remember a couple of things we've talked about already. One is that everything in the human form is round. So, so we've talked about that. And this is another example of that, in that I want to keep this ball round, and then when you start thinking about things like eyebrows, eyelids, everything is dictated by the shape of the eyeball. And by that I mean the lid, your eyelids rest on your eyeballs, and they get their shape from the eyeball. So if I can get this to feel like a ball, which means it's round from right to left and it's round from top to bottom, then the rest of my work is going to be easier. So here, when I go to make this eye, I have a little curved tool here, actually a big curved tool here. And I'll start at the tear duct, and I'll dig this in, and I can actually turn it downward and just pop it a little bit, and that makes the ear duct, eye duct, I mean, the tear duct. Did I say ear duct? Tear duct. And then I'm going to curve this. I'm thinking about the shape of the ball as I curve this and letting the edge dig in. Thinking about the shape of the ball and letting the edge dig in. And I can come back here and finish that. Now that's the lower lid. And now I can do the upper lid. Same idea, just kind of letting the edge dig in and following the shape of the ball. And that gives us a pretty good start on eyelids. The last thing I'm going to show you about this, and I can spend hours just refining this and refining it. The last thing I'm going to show you, however, is for the eyes at least, we're going to think about those pupils again, right? So what did we learn? There's the white of the eye, and there's the pupils, the iris and the pupil, and they're dark. So I'm going to just dig in. Looks a little painful. Just going to dig in. And what that's going to do is by leaving it dark, or by digging deeply, it's making it dark, and it's going to look like an iris. The other thing is, I don't make a circle. I don't dig out a perfect circle. I have two, it's like parentheses, and I'll explain that in just a minute. Get the rest of this out here. And what that's about is if you look at each other, look at each other's eyes, what you'll see is that you either don't see the top or the bottom of the eye, or you just see the top or the bottom, but you never see both. And that's because you don't see both of an eye unless somebody's really terrified, or unless they've got like something in their eye. Then they're doing that. But otherwise, your lids go over the top or the bottom, and you can actually use that to create the direction of gaze in your piece. So you just want the sides to be curved, and then you want it to flatten out top and bottom. Now I leave a little bit of clay, kind of just a little kind of bit of clay there. Anybody know what that clay's for? Really kind of a cool trick. What that clay does is it catches the light. So the rest of the hole that is the iris and the pupil, the rest of that hole is dark. But by putting that little piece of kind of clay up there, it catches light and it acts as the reflection. If you look at each other's eyes, you will see there's a little sparkle, a little light coming, a little dot of light reflected from whatever's around us. And that adds a little bit of reality. And I can refine for a long time. One last thing for eyes before we move on to ears, and then I'll let you go, is it kind of makes the lids look more realistic if I get a line between the eyeball and the lid. The trick is, though, remember, you don't do it like this, because it'll actually look like you're carving into the eyeball. You go under the eyelid. Very important. So I just take my fettling knife. I'm just going to go under the eyelid. Don't have to go in very far. And that really makes it look like that ball is really separate from the lid. There's plenty of cleanup to do on this, but I'll do that later. So now what we have is the beginnings of a pretty, an eye, a very human-shaped eye, and then a kind of dot. We have lips, we have a nose. We need ears. We gotta have ears. Where else are the earrings gonna go? So we're gonna get some ears here. of the things I mentioned in the slide presentation is that for me, the ears do not have to be the same size. And that was a pretty radical discovery for me because I had been, I didn't like making ears because I felt they're kind of tyranny. I had to get them in the same place, the same size, everything had to be exactly, and I didn't like that. It seemed less like, it seemed more like copying. And then I started thinking about, well, but I like asymmetry, and what if the ear isn't there, and what if it isn't the same size, and what if it's not in the same place? And all of a sudden I was kind of liberated, and I could make ears with great joy. So I'm just going to start with basically, I don't know if it's a pear or a lima bean, something like that. It's going to be an ear. And your ears go typically from the top of the ear goes from the eyeball, and the bottom of the ear ends up somewhere around the mouth. But that would be an enormous ear. I don't want to make them that big, so I'm going to put something like that in. This is my big ear for this piece. So I'm just going to score. And it's really nice that Maddie is taking a film of this, so we will post this on your canvas, and then you can, if you want to remember something, you can do that. You can review it. How's it going, Jason?
Good.
Jason is adding horns.
The whole face is done. I'm working on the horns. I've got these papers here to help support the horns while they dry.
The other thing you can think about is that many cultures, so many cultures have masks. Can you name some cultures that you know have masks? Brazil, there's some fine masks in Brazil.
Egyptian.
What's that?
Egyptian.
Egyptian, beautiful, yeah. In fact, the whole around tombs and things, they have gilded masks and all kinds of things.
I really like the Northwest Coast.
Yes, can you say Eskimo?
No, that's even further.
Yeah. Oh, you're talking about the tlingit, the big birds. Yeah, with the moving mouths and so and they have a very stylistic way of painting. Inuit for the Inuit, right? The Inuit masks up at the very north, Alaska and above. Those are my favorites because they are very asymmetrical. They use a lot of found objects like baleen from sharks and different things. But where I'm going with this also is that these cultures, they have reasons for masks. There's all kinds of reasons that cultures use masks. Some common reasons, some of them believed in various forces of nature that needed to be communicated with, and so they'd make masks and have dancing ceremonies and things in order to celebrate or call for a good harvest or celebrate a harvest or somehow feel like they were in communication with the forces of nature. That was one reason for masks. The Japanese used masks in theater. So there's an ear, right? That's the start of an ear. There are cultures in Africa where the police officers, the protect the chief societies is how I've seen them. Who knows what it's really called? I've seen them referred to as that. They have uniforms which involve really ornate, involved masks. So if this is an ear, we know there's, I'm being very loose with this. There's some kind of ridge. Oops, don't go that far. There's some kind of ridge that goes around here. And then another one. And then the ear actually goes in, right? So I can punch that all the way through, and that's helping to join the ear. And again, I can clean this up a little bit more after the fact. And then what I need is a little bit of clay to do this little flap that goes into the hole of the ear right here. So, and this is the big ear. And so for the big ear, pull it out a little bit and I put a hole in it. So later, I will have to make an earring. So there's an ear. So at this stage, I'm going to make a small ear over here. And then I'll just work on refining the imagery a little bit more. But that's basically it. Any questions or comments about what you've seen so far?
So we start this project whenever?
Whenever you're ready, when you're clear on what you're working on now, you get started on your mask. Again, I would recommend maybe starting with half a bag of clay rather than throwing out the full slab. That's later on. So start with a smaller amount of clay and see, and just really give yourself permission. You cannot fail. You can't do it poorly. The trick is to start with it. Start doing the face. Put in a mouth, put in a nose, and look at it and say, you know, I really like the expression on that mouth, but the eyes are kind of weak. And strengthen them. Do something different. Try something else. Cut the nose off. Try it again. Just keep playing with it and pushing on it until it starts to make sense, until it feels better and better. Just keep going until it feels better. That's because everything looks so terrible for the first 80%. Have you noticed that? You start working on something that looks just terrible for the first 80%. And as you keep working and working, you get towards the 80% zone, it starts to look really good. It starts to look better and better and better. So just keep working it. That's what artists don't stop until it looks better. That's what you're doing. You're just going to work until you get something you really like. And it's okay. It may not come right away. It may come quickly. It doesn't matter. Just keep working until you get something that you're interested in, and it'll be easier if you're not shooting all over yourself. If you're not saying, "Oh, it should look better," or "I don't know about faces," or "It should look like this." Don't do that. Just look at what you have and respond to it. And just get really playful. Put in what you care about. That's what masks are in all these different cultures. They're things that they care about. Questions, comments, thoughts? Cool. All right. Go make art.